Today is the last sermon on Esther. Are you excited about that? Are you tired of seeing that book and that face? I love that book, and I'll get into why in a little bit, but I've had several people, as you've gone out the door each week, ask me, when are you going to kill Haman? I like that concept, but I'm glad it wasn't me that killed him. But I want to share some of Haman this morning, and I want to share kind of a summary of what we've been looking at over the past several weeks. You see, it was nearly 2,500 years ago that a man was up early and was on his way to work in a vineyard, and he was passing through those suburbs of Susa. That was the capital of Persia. He was going down one of the avenues, and he saw a man hanging from the gallows near the royal palace. The body was swaying in the morning breeze, and the vultures were circling all about him. And as the man stood there, staring at the body, another worker came along and asked, "Who's hanging there?" The man told him, "That's the body of Haman." The man said, "What? You don't mean Haman, the king's prime minister, who he's the one that lived in the Capitol building with the carved lions at the gate?" "Yep, that's the one. It's him. The king's prime minister who had those gallows built for that crazy Jew Mordecai." Actually, did you know that Mordecai was the foster father of Esther? But yesterday, the king commanded Haman himself be hanged on those gallows which were intended for Mordecai. It was in all the papers. You didn't see it? The headline was, "Haman hanged on his own gallows." I love thinking out of the box a little bit, just to what it might have been like 2,500 years ago. You see, the book of Esther is one of the most fascinating books in the entire Bible to me. It's very readable. It paints a lot of pictures. It paints pictures of palaces, and those palaces could have been in Aladdin, that Disney movie. Yeah, some great palaces there. I think it could have been there. It's a very readable book. In this book, men rose and they fell. The proud are brought to their knees and the humble are raised up. Princes and nobles party while the common people are left to worry about what comes in the morning. Plots and conspiracies are hatched and frustrated. You'd actually think that you were reading a first draft of a Stephen King novel with all that was going on here. Love, hate, pride, fear, revenge, faith, all these passions and emotions, worthy and unworthy. They sweep through the souls of the people that appear in this unforgettable book. This is one of two books in the Bible in which the name God does not appear. I've told you that Esther was one. Any clue as to what the second might be? Song of Solomon would be the second book. Although God's name does not appear in the book of Esther, His providence is there. His sovereignty is there. His truth, it appears on every page of the book. Now, I just want to take a few moments and I want to look at the backdrop to the great story of Esther. I'm going to start with just very simply that because of her pride, she would not go into the banquet of Xerxes and show off her great beauty for the king's drunken princes and noblemen. That was Vashti. What happened? She was banished. And this beautiful Jewish girl, Esther, was then elevated to become queen. Now, about the same time that she became queen, this guy Haman was promoted to the second command in the Persian Empire. He undoubtedly won that post because he has some great administrative skills. But I'll say, like so many other leaders around the world that we know about, Haman didn't belong to the nation of which he was the prime minister of. He was not from Persia. Haman was an Amalekite. And in your Old Testament, as you read through it, you will find that Amalekites hated Jews. There's no other or simple way to put it. But I just want to do a little rabbit hole here for a second. Do you know some of the other leaders, world leaders, that were not from the country in which they were leading? How about if I tell you Napoleon wasn't a Frenchman? He was an Italian Corsican. How about Hitler? He wasn't German. He was Austrian. How about Stalin? Stalin wasn't from Russia. He was a Georgian. And in the Bible, we got this guy named Joseph. Joseph wasn't an Egyptian. He was a Hebrew. So Haman came to power even though he wasn't from Persia. And he became the second in command of the entire Persian Empire. And I'm going to tell you, he was one of the most graphically painted characters in the Bible. One of the ugliest that we have in the Bible. And I say he was ugly because of his pride, because of his hate, because of his revengeful attitude, because of his conspiracies. Yet this morning, I think there are a couple things about Haman that we can all study and gain. In your mind's eye, picture you're in Susa 2,500 years ago, and you're now looking up at those gallows which were built for Mordecai, 75 feet high. Look up to the ceiling. That's twice as high as this ceiling is. 75 feet high. Imagine that height. Twice of what we see here this morning. You see, Haman wanted to make sure that Mordecai was seen from every corner of the city. That's why they were 75 feet high. So when Haman was elevated to this lofty post, everyone showed him reverence. When he came down the steps of the palace and drove around the capital, all the men bowed to him and showed him honor, all except one. That crazy Jew, Mordecai. Once again, remember, he is the foster father of the queen. Mordecai was the one exception to the entire chorus. The chorus of praise and the chorus of adoration. It filled him, because he wouldn't bow, it filled him with mortification and rage. See, in his mind, it cast a long shadow of all of his fame and his splendor. It was the only fly in the ointment. And there was a wise man that once said, a fly causes a whole ointment to stink. Now, we don't know from Scripture why Mordecai refused to bow to Haman. I'll throw my opinion flag up here. It is my opinion and belief that Haman thought of himself as a god. And because he thought of himself as a god, and Mordecai, being a very devout and faithful Jew, would not worship or bow to any other god except God. Whatever the reason was, it was a conspicuous display of courage and independence. Got two things I want us to catch this morning. Revenge belongs to God. That's the title of this message. And the first important truth that's preached by Haman's hanging body, that body with all those vultures circling above it, the first thing we learn is that foolishness of permitting one thing to ruin happiness and poison the soul. Have you ever seen that happen? One thing, I get so focused on one thing, I forget every good thing that's happening around me. Can I just tell you, I see that a lot. I see that a lot. That was Haman's first great mistake. You see, Haman was a man of great position and wealth and land holdings. From India to the Aegean Sea, there was a long line of bowing princes and nobles. But there's one exception. Mordecai. Haman forgot all about the thousands of praises he got because all he could see was Mordecai not bowing to him. Haman had from the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea, from the Caucasian Mountains in the north, clear down to the Arabian and the Numidian deserts in Africa. There was not a palace, a garden, a grove, a slave, or even a ship that Haman could not have if he just asked for it. Yet all he could do was to focus on this one obscure Jew who wouldn't bow to him. All of this, Haman said, referring to his riches and splendors. We look at Esther 5:13. He says, yet all of this does not satisfy me every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. I would call that a little obsessive, wouldn't you? That's all he could see, with everything else good around him. I was sharing this with my wife, and she just said, well, isn't that absolute ignorance? I think so. You see, the one thing that Haman could not obtain spoiled everything else that he had. Spoiled all the pleasure and the satisfaction, because he had quite a bit. And yet it didn't matter, because he wanted Haman to bow. Think about it. There's this man and this woman. They were placed in this beautiful garden that was well watered by 4 branches of the river which flowed through it. Every tree was pleasant to look at as well as good for food. All their pleasures, they were permitted to enjoy. There was only one tree they could not eat from, and that, of course, being the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So the man and the woman passed by all the other trees to concentrate on the one tree. And because of their nearsightedness toward that tree, they ate the fruit. And they were driven from the garden. How often have you seen that repeated? I want what I can't have. When you tell a child that they can't have something, what do they do? Okay, when I say child, I'm going to clear up through the teen years. If you tell them they can't have something, they're going to go find out how they can get it, aren't they? Let me just be honest. If you tell me I can't do something, professor in college, Mr. Thomas Gemeinhart, Dr. Thomas Gemeinhart, went into his class. The first day is History of Christianity. And in his class, he announced that nobody could get an A in his class. Do you know what that did to me? Oh, I got fired up. I wasn't going to let him tell me I couldn't get the grade that I thought I needed. And I got the A. You see, that's how the human nature works. When we're told we can't have something, that's the one thing that we want more than anything else. One forbidden tree has turned men and women out of the garden of peace and contentment. One thing not possessed and it is impossible, it spoiled the great realities and the possibilities that we have in our life. One unbowed head hides 1,000 friendly greetings. You see, this kind of thing happens in the culture, but it also happens in the church. Hearts are filled with bitterness and unrest because although hundreds of doors are open to people, the one that has the unwelcome sign hung above it is the one that we want to go through. It happens in the world of singers and artists. And it happens to preachers and prophets too. The one descending note of criticism that causes the praise of others to be out of tune. I was serving at First Christian Church in Canton, Ohio, with a gentleman by the name of John Hannum. Let me try this again. John Hampton, who was a dear friend. John, I thought, was a very good preacher. And he was preaching one Sunday and got done, and man, I thought it was a phenomenal sermon. And we had a little old English teacher in our congregation, and she came out the door, and she told John just how poorly his grammar was used in that sermon. He used apostrophes here when he shouldn't, and he said revelations instead of revelation. I'm going to tell you what, she pretty much took his English to pieces. But after all the good that was done and all the people said to him, you know what he remembered on Monday morning? The English teacher. He was one of the most upbeat guys that I've ever known in my life. Monday morning, we could not get him out of the dumps because of the comments of one English teacher. It's amazing what can happen when we can't hear what we think we need to hear. You see, the wiser thing that we need to do is rejoice in what we have. We don't need to be wasting tears or longing or disappointed over the forbidden fruit. Take the positive, forget the negative. Think about those who love you and forget those who don't. Shakespeare had Hamlet say it this way: there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Interesting thought, but I will tell you it's a half-truth. Because there are things that are so bad, they're bad no matter what you think. But yet it is true that the things in themselves, the trivial things, the insignificant things that when we dwell on them and we brood over them, however we brood and however we dwell will determine whether they are good or bad. Don't let one unopened door or window control everything else in your life. Lesson 1. Lesson 2. The second truth is written as if it's on a billboard on that body of Haman that's hanging in those gallows. The foolishness of revenge. Oh. It is foolish to think that we can get revenge. When I was young, people would, do something to you and they'd be wondering if you're going to get back at them. You ever had anybody like that? Oh, they did it. Now I'm expecting them to do something to me. My philosophy was, I don't get even, I get ahead. Right? Isn't that what we try to do? That's the human nature, folks. That's what we are. We think we can handle those things, but this is God's job. God's only the one that can take revenge. It was bad enough for Haman to allow the issues of Mordecai to put him and overshadow all that he had accomplished for King Xerxes. And it destroyed a whole lot of night's sleep because he couldn't get it off his mind. But what followed is so much worse. His wounded vanity and pride, it brought forth hate. Hate brought forth revenge. And attempted revenge brought forth degradation, ruin, and death. You see, Haman had planned on this revenge himself. He was going to have it on Mordecai alone. But then he conceived this idea that it could get better or worse, depending on how you look at it. Because he conceived and brought forth the worst and most dangerous plot against the people of Israel that had ever been seen until the days of Hitler. and the concentration camps and the hundreds of thousands of Jews that suffered. You see, Haman had planned to destroy all the Jews, not just Mordecai, but he was going to destroy all the Jews. And Mordecai was supposed to die in this massacre. That's what was supposed to happen to him. And so with this in mind, Haman went to the king. And without giving the name of the people, he said to the king, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples of all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are different from those of all other people. They do not observe the king's law, so it is not the king's interest to let them remain. If it is pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed." You don't read anything here about Xerxes asking who the people are. I don't think he did. I don't think he looked to figure out who these dangerous people were. But he took his signet ring and he gave it to Haman, and he told him to go and get out the decree. Get out that decree of mayhem and destruction. And when you get that decree, you sign it, and then you put my signet ring to seal it. And Haman did just that. He sent it out to all the far-flung reaches of the Persian Empire by the fastest horses and messengers available to him. He sent them. And Esther 3:13 tells us what they were carrying. They were carrying a message that said, to destroy, to kill, to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. After this happened, my mind just got pictures. And after this happened, I can just see Haman just walking out away from the king, so proud of himself, because it was so easy to get the king to buy into what he wanted to do. I love that picture. So he persuaded the king. And in Esther 3:15, it says the king and Haman sat down to drink at that point in time. But the city of Susa was in confusion. They didn't know what was going on. But here's what I love about this book. It is now that this unnamed actor, the final authority on all human events, the God whose name is not even spoken or written in the book, shows up. See, back when Mordecai had talked to Esther about saving the people, he told her that she had come to the kingdom for such a time as this, that she might deliver her people from death. And so Esther wasn't asked by the king or summoned by the king, but yet she went into the king knowing that she could possibly die because of this. And she went into his presence because she wanted to plead for the people. And look at what Esther 5:3 says. When she touched the top of the scepter, which was in the hand of the king, he said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half of the kingdom will be given to you." Woo! Did she have the king's favor? Okay, maybe that's where this divorce stuff comes from today. Where you get half of mine and I lose half of mine. But Esther didn't ask the king right away with her chief request. Instead, she said to the king, she said, "Have Haman come for a banquet that I prepared." Got to understand, Haman is the only other guy invited to that banquet besides the king. But as he left from the banquet, proud and happy, probably had a little swagger in his walk, a little smile in his heart. But then he was going down the steps of the palace. He saw something that cast gloom and doom on him. And his whole evening was stolen. All the joy and happiness he had after leaving that banquet was gone, because it was that guy again. It's like Mordecai's like a bad penny. You know what I mean? It just keeps showing up. And he just keeps showing up in Haman's life. And when he came down those steps, guess what? Mordecai didn't rise up. Mordecai didn't bow to him. He just sat there. He didn't salute him. So when Haman gets home, he blows a gasket, complaining to all of his friends and his wife that this Jew, Mordecai, refused to bow before him every time he passed him when he was leaving the king's gates. What good is it for me to be wealthy and powerful as I am if this Jew does not bow down to me? Now, this is unfortunate. And what I say is unfortunate is Haman was married. And it's unfortunate because of who he married. Zeresh. Because when he got home, Zeresh actually suggested to him the next step of his demise. Zeresh could be compared to Jezebel. You ever hear that name? Ladies, has anybody ever called you a Jezebel? You better have slapped them. Jezebel. Think about that. Because you see, Jezebel, when Ahab came home complaining that Naboth wouldn't sell his vineyard to him, his wife said, well, you need to press some false charges against him, have him stoned, and then you can just go take his vineyard. Whoa. That's pretty much what Zeresh is saying. Kind of like Macbeth's wife. If you've seen that, you know what I'm talking about there, when she looks at the soldier and says, infirm on purpose, lend me your dagger. I'm going to take care of business myself. Zeresh says to Haman, who are you? Aren't you the prime minister of Persia? Aren't you second in command to the king? Yet you allow this little Jew to spoil your happiness. This is what you need to do. You need to build a gallows 75 feet high and then ask the king for permission to hang Mordecai. Then tomorrow you can go singing into this second banquet that Esther's having for you. Haman, he's so clueless. That's just what I'm going to do. So he called his carpenters together and to have the gallows built that very night. 75 feet high. So that night, the whole city of Susa was resounding with hammers as the gallows were being prepared for the hanging of Mordecai. But now, there's a very important sentence in this book. Remember, the name of God's not mentioned. Not mentioned at all. But this sentence is showing God's providence. Hang with me, because when you hear the sentence, it's not going to make sense. That sentence is, that night the king could not sleep. Think about that. Had it been the night before or the night after, everything would have been okay and Mordecai would have been hanged and the Jews destroyed. But it was this night that the king could not sleep. And in his restlessness, he had the secretaries bring him the history of his reign and read it to him so that he could be entertained, but more than likely, so it put him to sleep. They came to the part where two of his princes had conspired against him to kill him. Mordecai had overheard them, and he reported it to the king to save his life. And so as he listened, the king became rather interested in that reading, and he asked him to read it again the second time. And then he asked them if anything had been done to honor this man that saved his life. They told him, well, nothing had been done. Well, the king's sleepless night now turned into morning. Sun rising over the river, rising over the scented groves of the garden and the palaces of Susa. And a messenger came to the king to announce that Haman came very early to make a request to the king. Now, when Xerxes heard that Haman was there, he had him come in. And when Haman came into the king, the king said, I had trouble sleeping last night. So I had the history of my kingdom read to me. And I learned of a man who did me a great service, and I would like to honor him for his service. Haman, do you have any good ideas on how we might honor this man? Haman heard this. He immediately thought, the king wants to honor me, right? This is what I would do for the man, since it's me. This is what I would do. To do for the man of honor, your majesty, bring forth a royal robe and a royal crown, and have them men wear the royal robe and crown and put him on the king's horse. Then have one of the princesses lead the horse through the town, calling out the man's name, so that everyone in the community will know that the king is honoring this man. Xerxes looks over at Haman. He's pretty calm, cool, and collected. Xerxes thought just for a moment. And then he said, that's a great idea. You be the prince and put Mordecai on the horse. Oops. Not what he thought was going to happen. And when he took him around the city and he was parading him all around and talking about, this is Mordecai whom the king wants to honor. He got through with that parade. Can we just say that he was probably a little dejected at that time? He went home, humiliated, scared to death. And that wonderful wife of his, Zeresh, and his friends, they were there to support him, telling him that he was in for it now. Now, wait a minute. Did they not just encourage him to build gallows to kill Mordecai, to hang Mordecai? Yeah, kind of doing the two-step here, aren't they? They're backing up. They're going the other direction now. I told you, you should never leave Mordecai alone. So it's the second night, second banquet. Haman went with a heavy heart to this banquet, trying to have that, what we'd call stiff upper lip. When he got there, the boom was lowered. Oh, Queen Esther got him. She told the king of the plot of Haman to have her people destroyed. And the king was outraged. And because he acts very much out of control when he's angry, he said, Haman, you're going to be put to death. Not Mordecai, but you. And as they were leading Haman away, they asked, how should we put him to death? Xerxes' response was, well, he built a 75-foot gallows for the hanging Mordecai. Just hang him there. And that was the end of Haman. There was a body swinging in the morning, in the breeze. Vultures were all circling overhead. You see, it wasn't Haman's revenge. It was God's revenge. The harm that Mordecai put upon him, if he had passed over that, if he had ignored that, then he would have lived and died in peace with honor. But here's a very important statement. Wounded pride and vanity are always a danger. Wounded pride and vanity are always a danger. You see, they not only dim the light of the sun, but they tempt people to sin. In the 1800s, some of you remember that? Oh, nobody here that old? In the 1800s, the Democrats, or they were the Republicans known then, they put Thomas Jefferson and Burr on the ballot as their choice to lead the nation as president. And the second highest vote getter in the Electoral College would then become vice president because they only voted for president back in those days. And Jefferson and Burr each received 73 votes. Did you hear that number? 73 votes. Because they both received 73 votes, it sent the election into the House of Representatives. And on the 36th try, they voted 36 times in the House of Representatives. On that 36th ballot, Jefferson was finally elected president, and Burr became vice president. One of the determining factors of the defeat of Burr was the influence of a man named Alexander Hamilton. And he was with the Federalists. And the Federalists held the balance of power in the House at that time. And then a letter that was written to Bayard of Delaware, who was the congressman at the time, Hamilton wrote this: I could scarcely name a discreet man of either party in our state who does not think that Mr. Burr is the most unfit man in the United States for president. That's pretty strong words. And because of what he said about him and because of what he said in general, Burr determined to get revenge. So he called Hamilton out. And they had, if you remember your history, they had a very famous duel. And the fatal shot that ended Hamilton's life on the tragic shores of the Weehawken, it also ended the career and happiness of Burr. Burr spent the remainder of his life as a fugitive and a vagabond while he lived here on this earth. Later, this is what Burr admitted: it would have been wiser for me to have taken a sensible view that this world was big enough for both Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. Revenge didn't get him anything, did it? Revenge belongs to God. Vengeance is mine, thus saith the Lord. It's God's. It's not ours. James chapter 3 verse 5 says, see how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. It's talking about the tongue. One of the ways that we try to get revenge in a low-key way is by using our tongue, by defaming people, by hurting people, by deceiving people. Malice blots out life's perspective. Would you hear that again? Malice blots out life's perspective. The very wise apostle said in Ephesians 4, be angry, and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. Folks, listen, if we harbor ill feelings toward another, we're doing exactly what Haman did. What we're doing is we're giving a foothold to the devil. But Jesus taught us how not to be vengeful. And he did it in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 43. Jesus said this: you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Vengeance belongs to God. Now, some of us want to see that vengeance in our lifetime. But God will take vengeance in his time. It might happen in our lifetime, but if it's an unrepentant sinner, it will definitely happen in the next life. It's human nature, guys. It's human nature. It's human nature that we want to get even. So it goes against everything we are to turn the other cheek, to not let the sun go down on our anger. It takes everything we are to be countercultural. to let God take revenge. Let's think about that, because there are people in our lives I know that we want to take revenge on now. There's people in my life I want to take revenge on. And I pray every day. Every day I pray that God remove that from my heart, because it's his job and not mine. If there's somebody in your mind right now that you're thinking about taking revenge on, it's time to start praying. And pray that God removes that name from your mind.